So today is the first nice day out here down in South Florida post the hurricane, and wanted to take out the Sony 15mm on my cool little Zhiyun M2s setup. Now, I've been really excited to do this review because out of all the videos out there with the 15mm 1.4, they're all really done on more consumer-based APS-C cameras from Sony, as that's all there really has been until the FX30 has come out. So today we're going to take a look at using it. I'm actually using it right now on my Zhiyun Crane M2s, just like the video I did a few days ago. I'll put a link to it in the description below if you want to see more about this combo. But we're going to stick to talking about the 15mm today. Now let's talk about some of its strengths. Number one, it's a super light lens, which is one of the reasons I got it. It's also a 15mm, so it's not too wide. There is a little bit of distortion, but it's wide enough to do a lot of gimbal work, but also telephoto enough to do talking heads. And then on top of it, it's an f1.4, so it's really great to get that full frame look from APS-C cameras. So a few questions I've been getting about the 15mm, because it's not a cheap lens. There is the Sigma 16mm that is a 1.4 as well, and is less than half the price. Number one, the weight. This is an incredibly light lens, and with the 16mm from Sigma, I would not be able to balance it on a super small gimbal like the M2s like I am right now. So that's number one. So the second reason I got the 15mm has to do with the autofocus. Now the autofocus on this lens is just incredible, especially if I'm going to use this lens to do some vlogging, but also to use it as a gimbal lens on some of my real estate work, event shooting, having an f1.4, having a super light lens, but then on top of all of that, being able to have amazing autofocus. That's a really big winner for me, especially because when you're shooting wide open at f1.4, pulling manual focus can be difficult, especially in a run and gun scenario. So I think the 15mm has at least me covered in a lot of those scenarios. So as you can see for vlogging, I've got a pretty nice angle right now. It's not too telephoto, it's also not too wide angle, but I also am using the Zhiyun Crane M2s kind of as a selfie stick right here. I don't like necessarily hand holding the camera after doing that with the R6 over the past year, because even hand holding, I'm getting about the same field of view on 16mm in full frame as I am with this 15mm on a crop sensor. But the difference is I'm actually stabilized on a gimbal versus having to deal with IBIS. And that's why the FX30 paired with the 15mm is definitely going to be my everyday camera for now on. So now we're here back in the studio, and earlier we were shooting an S-Log3, but right now we're actually shooting an S-Cinetone on the FX30 with the 15mm because I want to see how the footage looks straight out of camera. There are a few more features that I didn't cover yet, which are, number one, there is a manual aperture ring on the lens itself with another button that gives you the option to click or declick the aperture. A lot of filmmakers like the option to declick their aperture, so it's nice that Sony gives us the option there. There's also a custom button on the lens itself, so if you want to map that to anything, the option is there. Now let's talk about who this lens is for. Now, if you're a videographer, I think this lens is going to work really well for corporate gigs, documentaries, weddings. It's going to be huge with, especially because of its weight. It has an f1.4 and it's relatively wide angle with amazing autofocus. As a wedding camera, especially a wedding B camera, I think the FX30 with the 15mm is going to do absolutely great. Now, content creators I think will do really well with this lens as well, especially because it's an f1.4. 15mm is still relatively wide, so you could use it for studio shots and get a really nice field of view without it being too wide and distorted like the 11mm is. Now, don't get me wrong, the 11mm is a fantastic lens, especially for the money, considering it's a decent amount cheaper than the 15mm lens that we have right here, but it is a lot more distorted, so you gotta kind of pick and choose what you want out of these lenses. Now, I did mention earlier about using this lens for talking headshots. Now, I think if you're a content creator, talking headshots make a lot of sense. For documentaries, you could absolutely use this for talking heads as well. The main thing you're going to have to remember, though, is you are getting pretty close to your subject, so with light placement and everything, the 15mm may not always work. However, I do think the quality from this lens is really great. If you have any questions about Sony's 15mm 1.4G, the FX30, any ideas, comparisons you'd like to see, please make sure to put them in the comments below. And if you got knowledge and value out of today's video, please make sure to hit that like, subscribe, and notification bell to keep up to date with the latest videos from the channel. Until next time, my name's Geoff Fagien. Thank you for joining, everybody, and I will see you in the next video.